The challenge of climate change is enormous, and it presents a huge strategic challenge to business. Financial Times has estimated that transforming the global economy to a low-carbon enterprise is going to require an annual investment of somewhere between $500 billion to $800 billion a year. That's a lot of money, and the vast majority of it is going to be coming from private sources. So our challenge is to figure out how do we develop policies, how do we develop tools and public pressure, environmentalists and activists, how are we going to leverage the financial, technological and organizational resources of business to engage in this challenge and to help transform our world. And that means understanding the political economy of carbon and climate change. It means understanding how businesses formulate their strategies, both their product strategies and their political strategies, because if business is saying no, then there's an effective veto. We're not going to get any policy if there's wall-to-wall opposition for cap and trade or for carbon taxes. So this becomes the challenge for policymakers, for environmentalists. When you look at groups like Ceres, that developed the investor network on carbon risk, they realize that investors and investment banks are one of the key levers in putting pressure on companies to disclose their carbon. Groups like the Carbon Disclosure Project using information around carbon as a tool to get companies to start thinking and measuring and managing their carbon. The trick that they're using here is to use pressure through the investor community. It is such a mixed picture. On the one hand, you've got the Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, that still have very solid positions against climate change. At the same time, you've got...
They're fighting the climate change bill.
Yeah, they're fighting the climate change bill, Waxman Markey. At the same time, we've seen some very high-level defections from the Chamber of Commerce. Just this week, Jim Rogers, the head of Duke Energy, pulled out of the board of the Chamber of Commerce. Toward the end of last year, it was Nike and a couple of other companies pulled out of the Chamber of Commerce.
Because of climate change issues.
Because of climate change issues. And we've seen the rise of other industry associations and industry groups around climate which are for more proactive action. So, for example, US Climate Action Partnership has been pushing for a cap and trade, and that includes General Electric. It includes quite a lot of some of the energy companies. I think we've reached a tipping point where a lot of larger companies that are already operating under constraints in Europe, they have to comply with the European trading system, for example. So these companies, the last thing that they want is a fragmented policy regime where every state in the US and different countries around the world, where they're facing this fragmented policy environment and have to develop different products and different reports for every regulatory authority. What they'd much rather have is a uniform, coordinated policy, one carbon price, one set of carbon reporting rules, and one set of product requirements, so they know what car they can produce for the US, 10 different cars. And of course, those global rules tend to be a bit weaker as well. The federal rules are often weaker than what the strictest state would be. So they also have this incentive to get, to some degree, a lowest common denominator.
Even states within the US.
Yeah. So rather than have California set the standard with the strictest regulations, the federal regulations are quite likely to be more modest. And so increasingly we're seeing more companies join the bandwagon and say, let's have federal preemption on, for example, federal fuel standard, automobile standards, and so on.